Welcome to the Source One podcast. Consider us your on-the-go source for the latest insights in the procurement, supply management, and strategic sourcing industry. The first step to any cost reduction project is to determine savings opportunities by conducting a spend analysis. For many companies, however, collecting and making sense of spend data can be challenging, especially when the data is decentralized and varied across departments and locations. In this Intro to Spend Analysis series, Source One Associate Director and Spend Analysis Expert Jennifer Ulrich will walk us through how to conduct a spend analysis. In this fourth installment of the series, we're learning what to do with the spend data you've collected, standardization and categorization.
After we've collected our data, the next step is to cleanse and standardize the information. You'll start by sorting your data by the supplier field and creating a new column called Cleansed Supplier Name. You'll more than likely find that each data set, or even within the same data set, has multiple names for a particular supplier, especially if your supplier relationships do not all flow through one single point of contact or group. Take, for example, FedEx. If your company makes payments to FedEx, you will probably see the supplier listed as FedEx, Federal Express, FedEx Corporation, and so on. In the Cleanse Supplier Name field, standardize all these different options to one single name, and repeat the process for all lines of data. Make sure to pick a name that will be recognizable to anyone who's looking at the data. So Federal Express might make more sense to, for example, standardize to FedEx. At this stage, it may not make sense to standardize supplier names across 100% of the spend. If you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of records, this could be a very tedious task. If that is the case, utilize 80-20 rule. Run a pivot table on the data by supplier, then total up the spend. Identify which suppliers make up 80% of the total spend and focus your efforts on standardizing those supplier names. Ignoring 20% of the spend may seem troublesome, but keep in mind that within this data there are likely to be repeat entries for the same supplier. For example, FedEx missing the E instead of FedEx. At this point, we are simply identifying target areas. Once we identify worthwhile projects, we will then focus on collecting more detailed information. At that point, we can look more closely at the FedEx data from the supplier and determine where the discrepancies exist as far as spend goes. Once you have cleansed and standardized supplier names, it's time to regroup the data into sourcing categories. Sourcing categories are essentially high-level identifiers that indicate suppliers that provide the same or similar services. Grouping them together allows you to identify project areas and eventually leverage opportunities. Creating your category list is the first real step in the spend analysis process. Turning raw data into actionable information is the goal here. Spend analysis is not an exact science. There's no right or wrong way to do it, although there are some best practices that are worth considering. First, be general in your initial classification. Start at the highest level of classification that you can identify, knowing that you may want to drill down later in the process. For example, you know that Staples is used for pens and pencils and Xerox is used for paper products. But categorizing them in different buckets is not appropriate at this time. At its base, the initial spend classification is looking to identify which suppliers provide the same or similar services. So going back to that example, you might put Staples and Xerox into a category with administrative spend. Many suppliers provide a wide range of goods and services, making classification difficult. If you have managed to capture all line item usage details in your initial data collection, this information can be used to classify the supplier. If a single supplier performs two different services or provides two very different types of goods, it's important to only provide one high-level classification for the supplier at this time, likely going to be the majority of where their spend falls. And the final stage of spend analysis is an overall opportunity assessment, and understanding the full impact of a supplier relationship is critical to identifying these opportunities. This high level of classification will help with that analysis. Another way to develop the initial list of supplier categories is through the use of industry standard categorization tools, such as NAICS, the North American Industry Classification System, or UNSPSC, United Nations Standard Products and Services Code. NAICS is predominantly used in the United States, Mexico, and Canada, and classifies suppliers based on the most general category of products or goods they provide. UNSPSC is recognized globally and classifies products and services down to the line item detail. Both coding systems are used regularly in the United States, but you need to make sure that you do something that makes sense to your organization and the applicability across it. Once you have completed the initial classification, it's time to start ranking categories for further analysis.
Thanks for tuning in to the Source One podcast. Remember to visit us online at www.sourceoneinc.com. For more insights from our strategic sourcing and procurement experts, check out our blog at www.strategicsorcerer.com. Want to provide us feedback? Have an idea for another podcast? Let us know by emailing us at prrequest@sourceoneinc.com. Thanks for listening.